so I guess it falls to me to talk about one of these. So I already gave Bill the mini review before we started, gathering. So I did the one that's pictured here called Spectre. That's Robert Culp.
Hmm.
I guess most people don't know who Robert Culp is now of a certain age, or they saw him in reruns on Greatest American Hero. But Robert Culp was a brilliant writer, actor, extreme, far liberal Hollywood activist, close friend of Sam Peckinpah, and he became famous doing I Spy in the 60s with Bill Cosby, which was notable, because Bill Cosby was the first black protagonist co-star that I can think of in a regular series. Of course, Julia was the first black solo titular character who had her own series in the 60s. But I haven't seen a lot of I Spy. My mom and dad liked it, but it didn't get rerun a lot over here. Rerun a lot over here. Um, but we were talking about this earlier. Earlier than that, he was in an episode, Outer Limits, based on Harlan Ellison's Demon with a Glass Hand,
Hmm.
and he's a time traveler, and he has like kind of like a glass hand, and each like finger it's got, you can see through it and see all the little mechanisms. For the time, it was cool effects. Of
Hmm.
course, when he's got the glove on, he can move it, but when he's got the glass hand, it doesn't move. No CGI back then, but we didn't care. So it kind of reminds me of the image in the movie Logan's Run of the big crystal hand with the life clock in the middle. But now I think most people who are in the genre uh, probably, or at least marginally familiar with the fact that James Cameron plagiarized two Outer Limits stories, both written by Ellison, Demon with a Glass Hand and Soldier, and he kind of, which had Michael and Sarah, and he mashed them together and came up with Terminator. And, you
Lucky for
know,
him, Harlan Ellison isn't the kind of guy who sues a lot.
right. He did. No, no, not litigious at all. And
Hmm.
nowadays this happens all the time and everyone gets away with it. But Harlan Ellison wasn't that kind of guy to suffer fools gladly. So he threatened him, he sued him, he screamed at him, he yelled at the executives, he just went ballistic and he won.
Yeah.
And so when every Terminator 1 and 2 went on to video, they burnt into the titles, based on work by Harlan Ellison. I forgot how they worded it exactly,
Yeah.
but you can't miss it, unless you're sleeping in the opening credits. But I mean, and I was proud of Harlan Ellison for doing that.
Mhm.
That was one of the first things he did that made me think, man, this guy's really about something. Um, but anyway, uh, so Spectre, Robert Culp, back to Robert Culp. So in between Demon with a Glass Hand and Greatest American Hero, he does this TV pilot. So this has a great pedigree. It was created by Gene Roddenberry, and this was around the time Gene Roddenberry was in development for that first version of the Star Trek reboot that was going to be on TV, which had only about half the original cast. I forgot what they called it, like Phase Two or something. That
Yeah, I
kind of
think it was something like that.
Yeah, it evolved into the motion
Hmm.
picture, though
Yeah.
it had a lot of changes. But so during that time, though, Roddenberry was, obviously he had to eat too, and Star Trek, was not super lucrative then, like it is now. And so he just wrote, different TV scripts. He had written some stuff before Star Trek too. I think he even did a cop show with DeForest Kelly before Star Trek, and that's how he got him for McCoy. So Roddenberry wrote the script. Well, he wrote the outline, created the characters, and then he and Samuel A. Peoples wrote the screenplay. So Peoples was a guy who popped up on TV a lot when I was a kid, because most of the stuff he did by the time I came along was more kid oriented, genre oriented. Um, he uh, he co-created and wrote the first several episodes of the cartoon Flash Gordon that started in 1979, which strongly inspired the movie. And also they were already thinking about doing a movie of Flash Gordon because of the success of Star Wars. But then somebody said, let's do it animated. And then they said, no, no, let's do it as a TV series. So they did it as a TV series, but it all came around because in 1982, when the show ended, they composited the first several episodes written by Peoples into this thing called Flash Gordon, the greatest adventure of all. And it's I love the movie with a great cast plus Sam Jones as Flash Gordon. Um, but I have to say, the cartoon was pretty close to Alex Raymond's first couple of years of the comic strip, very, very close. And I loved it as a kid, and it kind of got me. I already liked Flash Gordon, but there really wasn't any Flash Gordon media floating around the '70s until that cartoon, and then the movie went boom. And so Peoples wrote that. He wrote two
Is
really
that the
cheap.
Filmation one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I remember they would intertwine now with Defenders of the Earth, and it looks so stiff in comparison.
Oh, Defenders of the Earth, it's terrible adaptation. It was
Well, I was a
anyway.
little kid when I
I
saw it,
know,
so
I know. You were the right age. So I was the right age for the original Flash Gordon cartoon. Um, but Peoples also did two really cheesy live action science fiction Saturday morning shows called Jason of Star Command and Space Academy. And they were hard to sit through even at my young age. They were really tough. One of them had Jonathan Harris playing kind of another variant on Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, i.e., a know-it-all asshole genius guy. And except here he was like the head of the Space Academy. And they were terrible. And but they both took place within the same continuity. For anyone who was a geek who really liked them, it'd be like, oh, crossovers, that kind of thing. But long before Peoples did all this, he did a lot of Western scripts under the name Ward Bond. But anyway, so he got roped into this Gene Roddenberry thing. Oh, well, I almost forgot. What he's most famous for as a TV writer is he wrote the second pilot for Star Trek called Where No Man Has Gone Before, which was aired first and had Gary Lockwood guest starring. Very famous episode. Um, and yeah, so that's where he began his association with Roddenberry. So like 11 years later, they do this thing Spectre. So Spectre is like it's a TV movie. It was 2 hours when broadcast, including commercials. Now the version that I got from rareless.com on DVD, and also the same print that I watched last night on YouTube, is a European version. It has no cuts for commercials, and it has near the end copious nudity. And all along, it has, uh, for TV at the time, even for Decadent '77, it's very frank about sex. And in this version, I think it even uh, inserted even more dialogue that was I want to say sexually explicit, but it wasn't implicit either. So, sex magic is a thing in this. I mean, it's treated as a thing, though that term is never used. And I think that's incredibly progressive for any occult program of 1977. But I mean, some people are afraid to do that shit today on camera. But well, I don't mean do it, but talk about it.
talk about
Um,
it.
right. So Culp is this guy named William Sebastian, and he was a criminologist, and he rose to the top of his field. He had this incredible encyclopedic mind, and very fastidious. Um, he also has a great self-deprecating sense of humor, a wry wit. He's very cultured. He likes women. Um, and his best friend, who was his partner in solving crimes and working with the police, was a guy named Dr. Hamilton, what he calls Ham, played by Gig Young. Gig Young is also quite into the ladies. So, right, I mean, all from the very
Mhm.
beginning, all the characters obviously have very, very rich intersexual lives that we're alluded to or even practically shown. And that also was incredibly refreshing for me for a TV movie of all things. Though, like I said, this is probably slightly different version, but so Ham, he comes to Sebastian and he says, I've got a mission for you. And, it's basically a lady in Britain and she wants help. She thinks her brother's possibly possessed by a demon, and she's been sending Sebastian letters. Um, and then she comes to visit him. Kind of weird timing, right, when Ham's there. And Sebastian has this really nice, beautiful apartment. It was a great set, not dated at all looking. And then his library is just an occult treasure trove and um, beautifully done. And he's an amazingly cool character. And So this woman comes and she's supposed to be that woman who wants to save her brother. So uh, she and William go to the library, and it quickly becomes obvious she wants to have sex with him. And he starts kind of joking around, and then he's like, "Hold on, I've got this book here. I want to show Ham when we come out. It's right this page." And he slams the open book on her chest, and it gradually burns her into nothingness. And he tells Ham, who he's locked out, and when he lets him back in, he's like, "Where's the woman?" He's like, "She was a succubus," and he's like, "Oh, come on." So, you know, Sebastian is an occultist, and Ham is a skeptic. But they both like to solve crimes and bring evil doers. And there's some really real world topicality. They have a conversation about criminology when on a plane slightly later, and they start talking about the Manson family and the Richard Speck killing all those nurses. All both obviously real life incidents that were still highly resonant in 1977, and obviously iconic now with true crime people, but of which I'm one. But I thought that was a nice touch. And so he's trying to tell him, William is trying to tell him, let's just extend this into the things that you think you need empirical evidence for, but that may really exist. Let's apply the same kind of logic. Let's also think maybe evil is a tangible thing, and it's not all like psychosis or whatever. And so, gradually over the course of the movie, Dr. Hamilton becomes, I guess, a believer by the very end. And their mission is it's very simple. And most of this movie was shot on location in England. So with the exception of the characters you meet at the beginning, and our, protagonists, all the other actors and characters are British. Um, and the guy who meets them and flies them there is played by John Hurt, and he's a brother of these two siblings that are having this clash over is the older brother crazy? Is he evil? Is he possessed? What the hell? Or is the woman insane? And now we found out that the woman who came to visit him wasn't the real woman at all. It was a succubus posing as her. Um, Same actress, but it was hard to tell at first. They had them made up so differently, but by the end, the real sister becomes a little more glamorous. So it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess the same actress, and I can't remember her name. But oh, one other character I just wanted to mention, because there's two incidental characters that I think are strong. Remember, this was a pilot for a TV series, so they're setting up this world. One is played by Majel Barrett, Gene Roddenberry's wife, and she plays the character named Lilith, who is basically Sebastian's, servant, maid, whatever. But she's also has psionic abilities. They don't belabor it. They don't try to blow you away with effects, but it's very subtle and therefore more powerful and interesting and realistic. But she's only in the beginning and the end. So when they get to England, their chauffeur is a woman called Sidna, and SYDNA, and she's played by Jenny Runeker. Is a really esteemed British actress. She was in a few cult
Oh,
movies.
that's funny because in Erie, Indiana, the sister's name is Cindy, and Marshall makes fun of her because her name is spelled Syndi.
Wow, you scared the shit out of me, Scott. I'm just gonna. I was not expecting that outburst. Thank you. What was I talking? I don't remember. Twin Peaks. No, okay. No,
It always goes back to Twin Peaks.
All roads lead to Twin Peaks. So Sidna is played by Jenny Runeker, who, in my copious notes, some of this I knew, but some of it I had to research. She's notable for a few movies. She was in Pasolini's Canterbury Tales, 1972, part of his trilogy of life. She was also in Derek Jarman's Jubilee. In both of these movies, she is totally naked with no problem whatsoever. Very much like her friend in real life and occasional co-star Helen Mirren. She was also had a small role in The Duelists, Ridley Scott's first and still arguably best movie. Of course, we can't not talk about Alien Blade Runner, but The Duelists is just an amazing work if y'all haven't seen it. But and also Jenny Runeker played in The Final Program, which was based on a Michael Moorcock novel about his character Jerry Cornelius. And it's actually the only Michael Moorcock novel that's ever been filmed to this day, which is kind of staggering if you think about how many incredible characters he has. I think they finally have the budget to do Elric now, so I don't know what they're waiting on. But anyway, so Jenny Reniker, her part is small. She does a little side eye a lot, and she's very, again, Ham points out, he's like, she's very sensual. And William's like, she's not a succubus. He's like, I know, I'm just saying, like, it's like these guys, all the characters have sex on their mind through the whole movie, which I found very realistic. But especially since most of the characters are British. So we're seeing actually British characters who aren't super stuffy. The real sister, Anitra, who summoned them there, she's kind of by her own admission a wallflower and kind of a prim proper, destined to be an old maid. But she even expresses at one point to William, I kind of wish I was like the succubus you're describing, because I would love to, basically, I would love to have sex all the time like my brothers. And he's decadent, and he says, I think my sister is out to get me because of my lifestyle. So at first you think he might be gay. You're like, is this a down low kind of reference? So, it's not, but it's the same mindset, because like I'm talking about, this is 77 England. So the fact that he's a promiscuous heterosexual is still seen as, oh my God, clutching pearls, what the hell? And so he's kind of an asshole, but he's kind of the almost a red herring, sort of. They tend to think that he is indeed possessed by a demon, Asmodeus. So they go into all this occult stuff. William has Pam collect occult artifacts. And the research for this script is incredible. Most of it, from what I've read, is very authentic to real occult practices and rituals. And then a lot of it's made up or extrapolated, but it's very convincing. It's a very literate script. Culp is totally convincing. He's just a magnetic actor. And it's weird because until I saw this movie, I always wished that he'd had a series like this based on interviews and writings of his own, that he could play this kind of character. So he did, but it just didn't get picked up as a show. But we do have this movie. So they go through a whole long series of events. I don't want to say it's slow burning, because it's pretty lively. It does have a lot of witty humor, a lot of double entendres, a lot of occult, esoteric talk, but not delivered in any dry or boring way whatsoever. And it's pretty compelling. And so Asmodeus is who they're after. And this family, they're called the Scions, these three siblings I mentioned. In their backyard, they have a little mini Stonehenge, which, that tripped me out. They call it a Druid Circle, which that makes sense. That's also used in the movie Allison's Birthday. I don't know if y'all have seen that. I reviewed that on this channel a while back. It was in that folk horror box set. But they also had like this strange like mini Stonehenge in their backyard. So they do, and they eventually go with their our two protagonists.
Just made me think of This Is Spinal Tap.
Well, the Spinal Tap Stonehenge is based directly on the Black Sabbath Born Again tour, where they tried to recreate Stonehenge. And unfortunately, the people who are creating it misunderstood the band and built it to scale. So there's no way they could take it on the road. So they lost millions on that right out the gate. But anyway, basically, they finally get in there with their artifacts. And the deal is that Asmodeus, the idea is that he has killed a human and taken their form. So their working theory, is the older brother is actually dead, and the one they're talking to is actually the demon. And once you become converted to Asmodeism or whatever, there's not a word for it, you gain the ability to shapeshift, and you kind of become these kind of animalistic creatures, and you maul, and they don't say it, but rape, maul, destroy people. And then they do say, after, this is also kind of coded, after you transform back, you have this incredible feeling of elation and ecstasy. And then also what that does is that gives power to Asmodeus, and then he rewards it by making you a more charismatic person. And basically you get laid a lot more, and you become a lot richer and rise in the British society. Because there's, this whole thing ends up being like a hellfire club. The sister calls it sarcastically toward the end a hellfire club. I think if you just watched it casually and didn't know what the hellfire club was, you would think that was the name of the cult. but the script's kind of like depending on you to have some acumen, which might be another reason it failed. People are like, what the fuck are they talking about here? Um, but it is like that. And of course, the obligatory ending, is they go underneath the mini Stonehenge and they find the gates where Asmodeus was loosed after 2,500 years. And they go into great detail about this and the sigils on the seal, and they have to get the two broken parts, and they find the corpse of John Hurt's character. So then they're like, okay, so John Hurt opened this, he's dead. So this sweet John Hurt character seemed like the sweet brother, he's Asmodeus. And so they have the full blown, everyone's in robes chanting to Asmodeus. I'm a big sucker for 70s satanic anything, music, movies. I don't know what's up with that. I'm not a Satan worshiper, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just psychologically disturbed.
Have you seen that one with
I
Orson
mean,
Welles,
interesting themes are
Witchery?
interesting themes.
Yes. What'd you say, Scott?
Have you seen the one with Orson Welles called Witchery?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I make it a point to watch as many vintage occult and satanic works as humanly possible. It's like I collect books about punk rock. It's just one of my fetishes. So, not sexual fetishes, though. With this movie, you might as well be, because
Sounds like it.
they call Asmodeus.
I've heard Gene Roddenberry was a sex maniac, so he's kind of unleashing it on this.
I've heard that too. And
honestly, maybe I should assign this one to my students.
I
teach a class about sexuality and I assign films. So
oh wow, because this is really a giant allegory about repression. But the protagonist is really part of a long literary tradition that really didn't have much sex in it. The occult detective, and Algernon Blackwood's character John Silence is a great example from early 20th century. He had a character John Silence, and he was kind of the for hire occult investigator. And the most popular early story is called A Psychical Invasion. This is back when psychical in Britain has always been used as a legit word. Here, people just say psychic, or as an adjective. But anyway, so I use psychical actually in my occult writings too, but as a homage to that. But they use it. They don't use it in this movie, but they do use it in the second one I'm going to talk about. We'll get to that so later. So yeah, it looks like they're going to sacrifice the sister, and the asshole brother that was kind of the red herring is going to do it for John Hurt. Some of the makeup in here is a little dodgy, and thankfully they don't linger over it. Like the glimpses of the people who turned into animal monsters, they're okay, but it's probably better. They're glimpses. The glimpses of the real Asmodeus, he's like basically a humanoid alligator. They don't really show him on camera a lot. It's pretty fast editing, but piggybacking on what Bill said a minute ago about that one movie, the money shot being on the cover, I was looking for graphics like this for this, and there's Asmodeus like on all these bootleg videos, and the full creature who you never see completely full like a portrait in the movie. But man, they found a still, and they're like, that's the star of the movie. That's the hook right there. And it really takes away from the power of the character, if that's how you first are exposed to it. Thankfully I wasn't, but still I was like, all right. So
the image that you're showing now that you're talking about?
No, that's Robert Culp.
No, I mean that the left side of it.
That's just fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It looks kind of like a face.
I thought it was face too. Yeah, I was thinking that.
It's not, but anyway, I could riff on, you remind me of something else, but let's not go there. So related but unrelated. So they're trying to seduce, since the brother, the oldest brother, the aristocrat asshole, chickens out on the sacrifice, they decide that John Hurt's going to seduce William Sebastian into this. So he has a great way of doing this, a major plot point, which I kind of forgot and also kind of put on the back burner. A major plot point you find out in the first few minutes when you first meet the character. So when he opens up his shirt, he's got this giant, this kind of triangular hole in his chest, and the skin is healed over, and there's scars. It looks really gross. And he was stabbed by a doll that now he can't find. And he tells Ham all this, and Ham's like, we got to get you to well, he's a doctor. He's like, I got to get you some help. And he's like, no, it was no, it wasn't a dagger. You can't see it. It was a doll. He's like, a doll? What doll? He's like, well, I can't find it. And then they do X-rays on him, or get a hold of his X-rays. The doctor at Ham, and he's like, something's near your heart, but there's some perforation, but there's no entry wound. So one restriction on the character, at least for this episode, this story, is that he needs to not be active. So that's another way they refer to the sex thing a lot, because there's a few wry comments about how, Ham's checking out these women, and William obviously loves women, but he can't, if he got with a woman, he'd be dead, right away. They pretty much say that pretty quick. And so he does kind of exert himself and get oversighted a few times, and Ham has to kind of diagnose him. And it's really like an old kind of pulp kind of thing, almost like a Holmes Watson kind of thing, but maybe reversed. Well, maybe not. Watson was the doctor, but it's basically like if Holmes overdid it, Watson would treat him, and then he'd do some of the legwork for him. I say if I don't. There's probably a story like that, since there's thousands of Holmes stories, but in this case, Ham goes and collects the artifacts. But a lot of times William's all excited. He gets, let's move this column and find the seal that brought it in. He's like, hold on. And there's a lot of times when literally Culp stops and he's in agony for like 15 seconds acting it out. And as someone who's constantly in a lot of agonizing pain, literally right now in my life, it's very believable. And again, a realistic touch that I thought really added to the movie. Because, the guy could die any minute trying to stop Asmodeus. So what's Asmodeus's bargaining chip? He picks up this little container and it has the doll in it. And they don't say the doll contains his soul, and his soul was taken out. They never say that, but it'd be easy to think that. I don't know if that's what they intended, but that's what it reminded me of. Like, here's your soul. I'm going to plug it back into you, and you'll be cured physically. And actually, he does take the doll and cures him. And so William, suddenly the scar's gone. He's not in danger of dying. His heart's fine. And so he steps up to take his part as the high priest of Asmodeus. And Ham's kind of like, oh, fuck, I thought we were supposed to grab this seal and ward off and save this woman. And he doesn't say this, but he's such a great actor that, he conveys all this pretty much wordlessly, like, hey, William. And he believes William is seduced for a couple minutes. And he asks him toward the very end, and William just laughs. So you don't really know if William was kind of like, this time I'm not going to go back on the bargain. I saw what happened. Maybe I'll do this high priest shit, But at the last second before he's supposed to kill the woman, he turns to Ham, and they go back to their plan, and they save her. And the older brother, who's been kind of redeemed, he turns on the cult. They kill him. There's all kinds of nudity that wasn't in the TV version, like all the women and men, but you don't really see, obviously, you don't see men's genitalia because of the time. But, they're naked under their robes, of course. So it falls in line with a lot of satanic cult, theatrical films. But, they cut that out, for the TV. But there's a lot of that, and it's all chaos. Everything falls down, and Asmodeus blows up. Basically they throw the seal into the fire, and John Hurt is sort of partially transformed, and his makeup isn't that great either. He looks kind of like Worf did in season 1 of Next Gen before they got the makeup right, like the movies. They were kind of like, we don't have the movie budget. That's kind of what it looks like. Just some ridges up here, some plastic, and that's kind of sadly what he looks like. But he's John Hurt, so he pulls it off somehow. But so the ending, obviously, is we're setting up, a series. What are we going to do now that these two best friends are reunited? And their friendship is another thing that was realistic. As two male friends, I mean, there's like all these kind of allusions, and there's also something buried in the script that, I found out was that Ham is an alcoholic, and so when he comes to like a heavy alcoholic, like killing himself alcoholic. And so when he comes to William's like, well, I'm sick, but you are too. And William's like, I'll beat it. I'll take care of it. Of course, he wants Michelle Barrett to bring him a martini or something. And William performs this kind of little esoteric sigil thing, and from then on he can't drink alcohol. When he tries to drink it, he gets ill and spits it out. So he's like cured him of alcoholism. He doesn't have any withdrawal or delirium tremens though, amazingly. But maybe that's something magic too. There are a lot of little weird magic spells that William does. A lot of them are very simple with just a lot of this and some Latin words and some made up words, but they're very effective, and they're minimalist. That's why they hold up. They're not like trying to be like Doctor Strange. And to its credit, the Doctor Strange TV movie did the same thing, and that's why to me it holds up pretty well overall. But another, in my opinion, great occult TV movie from the same period a year later. So it never became a series, but I loved it. I thought it was brilliant on just about every level. The camera work was way above average for a TV movie. The music was way above average. The end credits, they take the theme from the beginning, which is kind of played almost medievally, and they play it on this extremely distorted electric guitar all the way through. It's just crazy sounding, and I'm like, this is so cool. So that's Spectre. So Scott, what do you got for us next, man?
I'm going to talk about Frankenstein, the True Story, which is one that I had wanted to see for ages and wasn't able to, and I finally got a copy of it this year. It kind of purported to be a closer adaptation of the novel than previous versions. It wasn't really. I mean, if you want,
right.
This one was made by Kevin Connor in 2007, I think, but Kevin Connor's not a very good director. I even heard from someone who worked with him, he doesn't really get in depth. So this is a little disappointing. And then there's this one, and I'm just going to say this is basically like a remake. It says it's based on Shelley, but it's basically a remake of the original movie. But I'm going to talk about this one.
Let me ask you a question. Have you seen Terror of Frankenstein?
I have not.
Scandinavian film.
Heard that,
so Per Oscarsson plays the monster. It's incredible. It's a straight adaptation.
Yeah,
I would have done the makeup differently, but the fact that they wanted to do it so differently is cool.
This is the 1831 version. I haven't read the 1818 version, but I understand they're not that different.
It's a great book, yes. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, this is Frankenstein, the True Story. This has Leonard Whiting as Victor Frankenstein and Michael Sarrazin as the monster, but he doesn't really look like a monster. See, I don't know how well you can see that, but that's Michael Sarrazin. That's how he appears in the film. But because he starts to decay over the course of the film, and they do get some names like unlike in the book where he's a dropout, he does become a doctor, as in many of the traditional film versions, and he goes to work at this hospital in a smaller English town where he meets Henry Clerval, who's a doctor who is in the novel is his best friend. But he has a heart condition and he dies. And so what ends up is that this character is a peasant who got killed in a carriage accident, and he's the most handsome of them. And Clerval has the heart condition. He doesn't get his nitroglycerin pills in time, and Frankenstein puts his brain into the Michael Sarrazin character.
Tell everybody who plays Clerval, because it's a famous actor who died just a few weeks ago.
Yes, it's David McCallum, who just died recently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I've seen him in anything else. I didn't really recognize him.
Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Invisible Man.
I never saw that show.
He was kind of languishing in obscurity till Mark Harmon tapped him for his show, which is still running. And actually, I just friended Mark Harmon on Facebook, and he did a giant tribute to David McCallum that was pretty cool. But anyway, go ahead.
All right. So anyway, so he's doing these experiments in this house where the landlady's Agnes Moorehead, which is kind of fun, but I have to say Elizabeth, who's played by Nicola Paget, is really a piece of work, because she's like, this is monstrous. She at first she sees this frame of all these dead butterflies on display, as they typically would be, and she's really fascinated by the yellow swallowtail. So Frankenstein brings the yellow swallowtail back to life, and she's horrified and she smashes it.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, and this is her attitude throughout the entire film. It's interesting because it starts out with James Mason. He shows you Mary Shelley's grave and says, like, keep in mind that this story was written by a 19-year-old girl, but I don't remember Elizabeth being such a piece of work in the novel. I'll certainly say that. But anyway. So it's a two-part film. So it's got James Mason as this character, Dr. Polidori, who's inspired by Dr. Pretorius of Bride of Frankenstein. And of course
And he's named after one of Mary
he's
Shelley's
named
real
after
life
John
friends.
Polidori, the
He was
doctor
Byron's doctor.
Byron's friend. And even the thing, because the monster does speak a little bit in this film. One of the things is Henry Clerval likes to call him Polly Dolly, and that was a real thing that Lord Byron would call.
Was it?
I didn't know. Lord Byron would call Polydorus.
Polidori hated it too.
Yeah, he hated it, and so they put that joke in the film. One of the things I really like that, just even though the day for night is really bad, they do really get the atmosphere of the novel right, even though it's not to the letter. I really feel like it got the mood right. I really like a lot of like the special effects where you see like the chemicals in the blood going. I think that's really cool. And then in the second part, which is kind of inspired by Bride of Frankenstein, Jane Seymour is this character called Agnes, who's based on the character in the novel called Safi, who's actually a Muslim, but obviously they weren't going to do that. So because in the novel, the monster observes the DeLacy family and the son has married this Muslim woman. He's trying to teach her the language, and so that's how the monster learns French, because he speaks fluently in the book, and he speaks English at the end of the novel. So he obviously is a very intelligent, but he's nowhere near this intelligent. And as he's introduced, one of the nice tropes I think is like the monster gets obsessed. He gets taken to see The Marriage of Figaro, and he gets obsessed with it. He tries to go back to the theater even though he doesn't have any money, but he's just totally enchanted by The Marriage of Figaro, but he starts getting these growths at the back of his neck, and it gets worse. And it is strange because people run from him horrified. It's clearly he just has like some sort of disease, and it's like, why are these people running and screaming? It's like, obviously this guy is just a guy who's in pain, but like,
remember what they did to the Elephant Man, though. I mean,
yeah. But in this case, it's not even that bad.
I know.
It's just amazing just how horrified people are. But he gets interested in this woman called Agnes, but her boyfriend Felix attacks him, so he gets crazy, and they end up both getting killed. But he's enchanted by her head, and so they use her head to make this woman that Dr. Polidori wants to first have married to a rich guy and then be the mistress of an even richer guy. And she actually reminds me kind of like of like AI a lot, because she's very imitative. She's really so she sees other people faint, and so he ends up fainting at the tail. She just like tries to be this like total imitation of a lady of that time. But eventually the monster bursts in, and I'm not sure why, but he comes in and he rips her head off, which is shocking.
And she has a name, unlike the bride Frankenstein.
Yeah,
she's called Prima.
Name. She's called Prima.
Yeah.
But for some reason the monster, even though he seems to be in love with her, he rips her head off. And
I think he's upset that she's assimilating into Victor society.
Yeah, that could be it, because I really wasn't really sure why he did that. But
I think it's just possessiveness.
And then in the end, it does end kind of like the novel where he's being pursued on a ship that Frankenstein tries to take to the Arctic. So that is a little bit like the book. And the captain is actually played by Tom Baker. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he doesn't get named. It's not like he's developed like
he's not Walton.
Yeah. He's not like Donald Sutherland in the Kevin Connor film or anything.
I like the ending, and I think by the ending he is pretty intelligent and articulate.
Yeah, by the end he's pretty intelligent, and Frankenstein really recognizes his guilt. He does in the novel, but in the novel it's definitely like too late. And at least in the film he kind of acknowledges it, but they do both get killed in an avalanche. But he's like, yeah, I really wronged you, and I want to heal that, but obviously it can't happen because they're in the Arctic and they're in the Arctic. They're not dressed for the Arctic, and they're not going to survive.
Well, Frankenstein can handle a little better than Victor, but arguably, maybe.
Actually, yeah, in the novel, Frankenstein has this one moment of feeling kind of sorry for the monster, but then after that, he just really starts going up against him again. So, yeah, it's only
well, in the novel, the monster kills his brother William, and here William drowns at the very beginning of the film.
Well, in the book,
and William is much older. William's a teenager in this, and he's like 5 in the novel.
But Frankenstein in the novel and in this movie kills Elizabeth, correct?
Yes.
Yes, the monster does. It happens on the ship, actually.
Yeah,
on the ship. The lightning strikes her and she turns into a skeleton.
No, that's Polidori.
No, that was Polidori.
Oh, you're right. Polidori. And Polidori has this
I
weird...
was like, that was like the worst moment of film. I looked up, can that really happen? It's like, no, that can't really happen. Because I was like, that is absurd. And I even looked it up. And I'm like, am I wrong on this? It's like, no, it is absurd.
Freaked me out when I saw it the first time, though.
Yeah, it freaked me out too. His hands freaked me out too.
Oh, his hands are like what?
Because he can't perform surgery anymore.
Yeah, he's got one hand. He's got one hand that's skeletal, and he's got another hand that I forget how it's messed up, but it's not messed up as badly.
Yeah, Mason's good at villains, though.
Yeah.
That character seemed weird to me. The more I've seen it over the years, and I've seen it quite a lot over the years, I saw it first run, and then every time it would be on TV. But I really don't understand the logic behind his character being in the movie. But it just seemed kind of like the movie could have just been without him. But it's like they had to have some villain who's kind of like subtly manipulating the characters and manipulating
and I've read some stuff about how he's like subtly homosexual and like he does pull Victor away from his wedding night and so there is that kind of subtext in it. The problem is though, I mean, what can he do with those hands? I mean, Victor's not gonna ditch a woman for that. I mean, there's other things, I guess, but I mean, that would be a turnoff for me if he took his gloves off on him and Victor's wrist, and Victor's like, "Oh God, okay, back to Frankenstein monster."
If one of your hands turns into a skeleton, just cut it off. I mean, get a hook or something.
Yeah,
honestly.
Polidori does try to actually dissolve the monster in a vat, and Frankenstein saves him, but the monster's not grateful for that.
I like the dynamic in it. I think that is more realistic than any previously filmed version. Now, like I said, the one a few years later made in Sweden or whatever. That kit captures it. But most people have not had access to that movie until it came out on DVD. I used to have it on DVD. I think it's on Blu-ray, but it might not be.
Well, I have to say this one was really hard to see. This was one I wanted to see for years and years and years. I'd read about it in books, but I could never find it.
Yeah, it was never shown on TV after the first few times.
Yeah, it was before. It was 1973. It's before I was born, and this was like that. I remember I first saw this in the Ian Thorne Frankenstein book, and I was think about how little tiny me felt being scarred by that and Trilogy of Terror the same year and Kolchak. I mean, I don't think I could even talk yet then. But I mean, those images just boom, like branded in my brain. But the contrary to what, I remember being scared of the Zuni fetish doll just seeing the box in the stores. So I never wanted I was like, I don't even want to watch this thing. This is creepy as hell just on the box. Because they even released that portion as a short and called it Terror of the Doll and had that thing taking up the entire VHS box. I was like, God, that is the most horrifying thing I've ever seen.
Violent. It's pretty damn violent too. It's not gory, but I mean, he uses that knife on her. He's not messing around. Even though she's way taller than him. What does he do? What's she do with him? Does she throw him in the stove or oven or something?
Right.
Okay.
And then she opens the door. Classic blunder.
What are you gonna do? So overall, what's your thoughts about this now that you've seen this masterpiece or quasi masterpiece?
I thought it was really good. Even as a big fan of the novel, I kind of like put aside expecting the films to get the novel right. And I feel that this was really atmospheric. It mixes elements of the Universal. It was made by Universal, and actually the clip of Carabino in The Marriage of Figaro is actually taken from the 1943 Phantom of the Opera.
Oh,
and
wow. I know that.
I found that out from IMDb that was actually Susanna Foster in the Phantom of the Opera. But it is a really nice mix of elements from the Universal series, which is really wonderful, even though it's so different from the book. Which the book, when I read the book in college, and that just grabbed me. I mean,
I had a hard time.
I found the characters so relatable. I just love the book, and I've read all of Mary Shelley's other novels. I think she's great. Not everyone does, but I love her.
So you've read The Last Man too?
Yeah, I've read The Last Man. I've read Matilda, Maurice, Fortunes of Perkin Warbeck, Valperga, Faulkner, Lodore, all of them.
Frances is a scholar of this stuff, and she's impressed.
I adore Mary Shelley. I want to make a film of Faulkner. It is not a horror film at all. It's about a little girl who rescues a guy when he's trying to shoot himself, and he ends up adopting her, and a lot of interesting stuff happens, but it's definitely a drama and not a horror, and I would not want to make it in the United States. So I don't think I'll ever get to do it, because I don't know if I'll ever get to make a film.
You never know. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I really wonder why is it so hard to make a straight novelistic adaptation of Frankenstein? Except for that Swedish one, I guess. And when was that?
I don't know. I would love to make
1977 or 78. It's just it was just obscure.
I would say it's because the culture is so ingrained with the Frankenstein, the Boris Karloff, and all the ones that came after it. To see an articulate Frankenstein, it would be like doing a literal version of Tarzan, where the guy speaks like a college professor. We're used to Me, Tarzan, You, Jane, and seeing, even though it's the original, most people haven't read the original. They've seen,
I don't care for Tarzan in the movies, except for Greystoke.
Mary Shelley actually saw a stage production where the monster was mutant. She laughed at it. She wrote about it in her journals about how bad it was. And back then it was totally legal to adapt stuff for the stage without crediting the author. So,
well, it's funny because when I saw that movie, I'm not going to say how old because I don't tell my age, but you could figure it out in context. I was really young. I saw it first run. I saw it repeated 2 years later.
I thought you said you were 3.
I was slightly older than that, but I was very young. Yeah, no, I didn't start talking till I was 3. So I might have been talking a little then, but and then I saw the Marvel comics, and of course it's Marvel Comics. That was my first exposure to Frankenstein. That and that movie. And then a couple years later,
mine was the Electric Companies.
Oh wow, that's probably a lot of people's first Spider-Man. Yeah, I remember that. But a couple of years later, I finally started watching the Universal movies, and for many years afterwards, I hated the Karloff Frankenstein. I didn't think the movies were terrible. I thought most of them were terrible. Now the ones I thought were terrible, I think, are kind of quaint and charming. The ones I thought were just okay, but they got Frankenstein wrong, I think, are really good movies. But I just hated that version, and I'm not fond of it. I'm still not fond of it. I don't consider it the actual Frankenstein monster. And there have been essays written about how the two can coexist in a literary archaeology sense, this being two different monsters created by two different members of the family, and that's kind of how your headcanon. That's the only way your headcanon can reconcile them as both being equally valid. Same with Tarzan. Tarzan.
Actually, one of the interesting things we're talking about that is Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman was like one of the classic cases of a test audience ruining a movie because Bela Lugosi talked as Frankenstein at the end of The Ghost of Frankenstein, and then that was supposed to continue straight off in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, but the test audiences laughed and replaced it with grunts.
Yep.
And so it just totally fucked up the continuity. And they didn't care because like people weren't watching these on video, and they didn't realize that he spoke at the end of The Ghost of Frankenstein.
Well, the Marvel comic is the first 5 issues is an actual real adaptation of the real book, and I love his design in the Marvel comics.
Yeah, it's great.
And but they had a problem because when they started continuing with new stories, were they going to set him in the 19th century? Were they going to have him talk? So they had to make these contrived. He survived the ice flow because come on, I mean he's not human, but like I think his vocal cords got scratched when he fought Dracula, and so he didn't talk for a while. And then it was only near the very end of the series and some of the Monsters Unleashed series, and then subsequently in his crossovers with Marvel superheroes and horror characters, that he was as intelligent as in the book. Finally, they're like, yeah, let's go with this. You're just gonna have to get over it, kids. The Karloff's movies are great, but this is not. We showed you what the book was, and Mike Ploog was the perfect guy. I mean, he drew. He drew Werewolf by Night. He drew Frankenstein Monster. He drew Ghost Rider. I mean, he designed Ghost Rider and Werewolf by Night, and he drew Man Thing. I mean, he was the man. And his art style was so weird compared to a lot of the other artists. And then as I got older, I'm like, God, his stuff really looks like Will Eisner. And then I found out that's how he came up as under Will Eisner in his studio. And I love Mike Ploog. Anyway.